Okay, thank you. I'll call the meeting back to order. We're now moving into a statutory public meeting, timed at 1 o'clock. As required by the Building Code Act, a public meeting is being held prior to council making a decision on proposed amendments to the City of Kawartha Lakes Building Bylaw 2021-161, being a bylaw under the Building Code Act respecting permits and related matters, passed under Section 7(6) of the Building Code Act. The City of Kawartha Lakes is proposing to adopt amendments to the building bylaw following a review of the current building and septic permit fee structure. The effect will be to update the 5-year fee schedule to extend it for a further 3 years, introduce the pre-approved model process and a cost recovery fee relating to the registration of building code orders on title, as well as some minor housekeeping amendments, and will take the form of a replacement bylaw. There will be a short presentation from staff first, followed by an opportunity for the public to provide comments. Everyone who speaks is required to provide their name and mailing address for the public record. Anyone wishing to speak needs to provide their full name. So we'll start with the repeal and replacement of bylaw 2026. Well, before we do that, I think Ms. Murchison has a presentation for us.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of council, fellow staff, and members of the public. I'd like to give a brief overview of the report I've prepared for council today relating to the changes and updates to the building bylaw. So the Building Code Act, Section 7, provides the Council of a Municipality the authority to pass a bylaw, a building bylaw, and to include any number of items listed in Section 7 of the Act. The most common are classes of permits, items to be contained in a complete application package, requirements for building plans, fee rates associated with applications, and prescribed inspection stages. Section 7 provides that a municipality's fees collected under the Building Code Act must not exceed the anticipated reasonable costs of administering and enforcing the Act, and further, that any time there is a proposed change to a fee under the Building Code Act, that a public meeting will be held, preceded by a public notice period of 21 days. The Building and Septic Division budget is operated as a full cost recovery model, meaning development pays for development, and if fees are correctly set, there is no burden on the general tax base. The current building bylaw came into effect January 1st, 2022. The bylaw has not been amended since it was enacted in 2022, and as development levels increase, processes need to adapt to address workload pressures, such as multiple permit applications being submitted in a single submission for subdivision development. Increased volumes are prompting innovation, and these proposed changes require amendments to the building bylaw. Between 2021 and 2023, the 3-year average permit volumes for new housing starts has doubled the 3-year average seen between 2018 and 2020. The average total value of construction in all categories combined over those same timeframes has doubled as well. This additional development equates to an average overall yearly permit activity increase of approximately 37%, including both building and septic permits. The result of the increased development activity is to recognize process improvements and service enhancements, such as launching a full-service building and septic division hub in the Cobeconk Service Centre for the north half of the city, which mirrors the larger team hub in Lindsay. The Cobeconk hub includes a supervisor, building and zoning clerk, 1 Part 8 septic inspector, and 2 Part 9 inspectors. Additionally, e-permitting is another long overdue service enhancement for our customers, which staff have been working on throughout 2024. E-permitting will benefit both the customer and the staff experience. Our development partners have approached us to propose a process change to include a certified model approvals process to streamline the building permit process surrounding the use of repeat models within a subdivision. The current bylaw does not contain any guiding language for submitting in either of these formats. The current fee structure, which commenced in 2022, is working as planned, covering 100% of the operating budget for the division, while also growing the dedicated reserve account. It was estimated that the reserve cap of 2 times the yearly salary budget would be reached within the original 5-year schedule. However, with additional staff being added to address increased development, the cap target has increased. The proposed extension to the schedule is anticipated to address these increases. Since the enactment of the current bylaw, there have been several additional staff positions added to address development pressures, as well as recruitment and retention issues. In 2022, there was an addition of 3 building and zoning clerks, one as a net additional position to address development, and the other 2 represent reclassification of vacant inspector positions. In 2024, there was an addition of a building inspector. This full-time position was posted to replace a staff member on parental leave, and introduced as a permanent position to combat hiring difficulties recognized in the past when posting a temporary position for a technically qualified role. The additional position will not be fully recognized until July of 2025 upon the return of the building inspector on leave. We have proposed an additional 2 staff positions in the 2025 budget to address the anticipated permit levels coming at us, 1 new building inspector and 1 new building and zoning clerk. The majority of the Building and Septic Division operating budget expenses are attributed to wages, and the current fee schedule appears adequate to cover these new positions. The reserve account is currently at about 70% of the anticipated cap set in 2022. With additional positions and annual increases to wages, it is projected to require an extension of a couple more years to attain the cap amount. When the reserve cap is met, staff will return to council with a reduced fee schedule to be used until such time as the reserve account is drawn down substantially. Okay, proposed changes. So we will be introducing a new process for developers and builders who build repeat home models within the subdivision. The process is being aptly named Pre-Approved Model Approval Process, short name PAM. We have been working with one of our developers over the past several months to learn how the similar process is administered by our colleagues in neighboring Durham municipalities. In conjunction with IT staff and our software provider, we have been developing the process to be launched as our first application type available in the CityWorks public portal. With the other amendments being proposed and the increases to staff complement, it made sense to extend the 5-year fee schedule at this time while the bylaw is open to a public meeting. In tandem with the PAM process, staff have been diligently working on making all permit application types available for online application through our website, with the hopes of going to a full online permitting in 2025. As a result of online permitting and lessons learned during the COVID application influx, we would like to introduce a minimum application fee, which will be mandatory non-refundable fee equal to our minimum fee set out in the current bylaw, and will assist in incentivizing applicants to submit complete application packages. This change will not affect most applicants that do business with us, as existing bylaw already contains language surrounding refunds where they are not available to any amount that is equal to our minimum fee. There will be an introduction of new fee category for removal of building code orders from title. Currently, this is one cost being attributed to the general legal budget for the city. However, the cost should be passed on to the offending party. Inspection for verification of sewage system locations. The city has a fairly comprehensive set of sewage system records from the health unit dating back to the mid-70s. But occasionally when a record cannot be located, staff will attend the property to assist in locating the system in order to speak to the compliance with setbacks to structures. And currently there is no cost recovery for this aspect of the review process. There will be introduced a PAM fee for this new PAM process. It will address the pre-approval of repeat home models, which provides a fast-track process in the second half of the process with the applicant when they apply for their building permits. And then a final new fee for renewal of temporary holding tanks. So temporary holding tank permits are issued for a maximum of 12 months, and occasionally the applicant requires an extension for a further 12-month period. An example would be our sales office on Thunderbridge for Tribute Homes, which is on a holding tank until such time as their development servicing reaches that end of the property. There is a fee being removed, and that one is for administration fee for occupancy of a building without an occupancy permit being granted. We found we're not using that one anymore as we're dealing with it through enforcement. Various housekeeping changes are proposed to clarify items such as the refund process, alignment of minor administrative fees with the minimum fee, raising the upper cap on administrative fees relating to partial and conditional permits and major plan revisions, clarifying the ARU fees for detached versus contained within the principal dwelling, additions to the document and drawing Schedule B for the ARU and PAM types, and language around electronic submissions. A detailed list of all the changes is contained in the report. And that concludes my presentation, and I would like to now hand it back to the mayor for any public presentations or follow-up from council.
Thank you. I don't believe we have anybody signed up to speak to this change.
So if at this time, if it's okay, Mr. Mayor, I'll read in a written comment that I got from the Peterborough Home Builders Association. So they've said they applaud the City of Kawartha Lakes for incorporating pre-approved models into the building bylaw, recognizing pre-approved models streamlines the building process and frees up staff time. PKHBA would like to request a corresponding fee reduction for pre-approved models. Municipalities including London, Ottawa, and Caledon offer a reduced fee for pre-approved models. Example, Ottawa master plan fee and pre-approved model is about $400 per unit reduction on the building permit fee. This site plan and specifications section notes that an electronic format approved by the Building and Septic Division is permitted. Could more information be provided, which will be sent to them.
Thank you. Seeing no one else wishing to provide comments at this time, I deem the public meeting closed. A motion to receive the deputation or the presentation by Ms. Murchison, Councillor Richardson, Councillor Joyce. Councillor Joyce, you have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, excuse me. Thank you for this. And I just have a concern. I went to your Schedule A, the fees payable by building permits, and I didn't go to everyone. I just kind of spot checked it, and it's hitting around a 2% increase per year. But we know that salaries are increasing at 3% a year, and that's, I'm hoping we just don't fall behind. I'm sure you've pulled out your calculator and done a fine tune there, but just wanted to voice that we might fall behind, and we have to keep an eye on that. Thank you.
Through the mayor to the councillor. We had initially, when we established this version of our bylaw with a 5-year schedule, set the indexing at 2%, which I felt we could remain at 2% at this point because built into our fees is the building of the reserve account. The reserve account is intended for recessionary times when we would rather retain our staff than lay them off. So we can keep them as long as possible. So we look at a cap of equivalent to 2 years' salary. So right now, if we were to increase our 2% indexing to a higher rate, all we would be doing would be feeding our reserve account faster. So I think it seemed fiscally responsible to keep it where I was at.
Thank you. Councillor Ashmore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to Ms. Murchison. Thanks for the report. Just a couple questions, and you mentioned some of the municipalities, Mississauga and Ottawa and Collingwood. From what I read, is they adopted this method, the pre-approved model, and is it? I think in Mississauga's case, when I was reading it, it was based on fast-tracking garden suites and that sort of thing. Does it, and I was reading about the federal government, how they were trying to accelerate housing, and it was basically modeled after World War II when they wanted to have quick housing assembled, and they wanted to have it on a simple, bring it down to a fast-tracking design. Is that basically what we're doing? Like we're adopting that design where everything's pre-approved, and it'll actually, in your opinion, decrease the time from application to building?
Through the mayor to the councillor. There's actually two topics embedded in that question, and one of them is the province is looking at creating a registry of approved models, like they did post-war. We haven't heard an update since they first introduced the topic earlier this year, but we're waiting as CBOs to see where that one goes. If that were to be put in place by the federal government, any applicant could pick from a catalog. They have to build exactly what that catalog drawing says, and then they would be fast-tracked. That aside, what we're introducing, the PAM approval, is a fast track for our repeat model building in a subdivision. So our large builders that are building, a phase of 100 lots, but they only have 33 different versions of a house. And so we would pre-approve the 33 house model plans through this PAM process, and then when they came in to build one of those houses, they would just tell us, I'm building this number that we've assigned to them. We would then take an application in, check a site plan, and issue them a building permit. There's no delay at that point.
Okay, thanks. Just one more quick question. A couple of years ago, we introduced it's called a standby fee, whereby you can if you pay this fee, it's jumps you to almost to the front of the queue. But is that related to this, or is that a separate thing on its own, the standby fee or upfront fee?
Through the mayor to the councillor, I'm not familiar with the fee you're speaking to. I don't think we have one in our building department.
It may be called something else, but it was a fee that they introduced when if you wanted to fast track an application, whether you're a small, medium, or large developer. I just remember us passing that, and it was to get it going off the queue, in the queue faster.
I think it was a recommendation by the task force at the time that was working with planning, but I don't think it was ever adopted, Councillor. I don't recall that we ever adopted it, and I don't recall hearing of anybody ever using it. So, we can follow up and check, but I believe I'm correct. You okay? Your question?
Okay, thanks.
Deputy Mayor McDonald?
Thank you, through you. A couple questions. Where do we stand with other municipalities as far as your proposed changes, as far as the amount and the dollars? Are we high, low, medium? Where do we stand with that?
Through the mayor to the council. With the question coming in from our Home Builders Association on the actual reduction, I did a quick poll yesterday of my large municipality group. I received about 10 responses. And when I look at their regular permit fees, we're not very far out of line with, I would say, at least 25% of the group that answered me so far. If we want a deeper dive, I can do that. At the time that we set this bylaw up in 2021, for the current bylaw, I did a study with all municipalities that were large municipalities in Ontario, and we set our rates to be in line with all of our counterparts, but then we have a slightly increased rate because we're building that reserve. So once that reserve hits its cap, then we drop back, and we'll be actually in line with more of the group than we are right now.
Thank you. Another question. You mentioned just quickly about the ARUs. Could you just repeat what you said there? You said separate and attached. I'm not quite sure what that meant.
So through the mayor to the councillor, currently we have two fee categories, one for a new residential building and one for an ARU, and the ARU rate is a reduced rate. What we think in our head sometimes and what we put on paper doesn't always align. So I'm just tightening up the language in the little description. That's all I did in this bylaw version. Just to clarify that when it's a detached, we're going to charge it like a detached house. But when it is a renovation within the existing, then it will be charged that lower rate to acknowledge the fact that they're not building, they're just renovating.
And just one comment, we do these things so at the end of the year, you're self-sustaining and you don't have to come to council and ask for money to run your business. Is that correct?
Through the mayor, that is correct.
Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Awesome report. Thank you very much. And like you said, you're revenue neutral almost, and it's good that you are coming and giving us where you need to make those changes instead of coming later saying we need to make these changes now. With the pre-approval model, is the zoning intake clerk, is that the position that they'll be responsible for, or will that become like a uniform position?
So through the mayor to the councillor, it's kind of like taking the current building permit for a new house and splitting it into two pieces. So where we would normally do the intake first and then the plans review and then the issuance, this is doing the plans review and having that sitting waiting. And then when the intake comes into the intake clerk, they're able to actually issue the permit. It doesn't have to go to a second inspector to have anything else done. They collect the two documents they need to at the front end, and they can hit issue once the engineering staff have done their review of our grading plan.
See, the story keeps getting better, so thank you. Just maybe one more comment on the ARU and garden suites. Are we seeing an increase in that type of application in the Kawartha Lakes?
Through the mayor to the councillor, I don't have numbers in front of me, but I know it has been slowly climbing, not to the extent that some of our counterparts have seen. I know when the legislation changed originally and then changed again, cities like Brampton, we're seeing 2,000 applications come in within a month or two. We thankfully haven't had that kind of influx, but we're definitely seeing more than we have in the past. So there is some uptake.
So seeing no more questions or comments, we have a motion to receive the deputation. All in favor? And that's done. We'll move on to item 821, which is report BLDG 2024-001, repeal and replacement of bylaw 2021-161, being a bylaw to provide the administration and enforcement of the Building Code Act 1992 within the city of Kawartha Lakes. Did you want to speak to that, Ms. Murchison, or are you fine just to let it go? You're okay? Therefore, report BLDG 2024-001, building bylaw replacement bylaw 2024 be received, that a bylaw to repeal and replace bylaw 2021-161, being the bylaw to provide for the administration and enforcement of the Building Code Act 1992 within the city of Kawartha Lakes, as outlined in Appendix A to report BLDG 2024-001, be substantially approved, that the necessary bylaw be brought forward to council for adoption, and that this recommendation be brought forward to council for consideration at the next regular council meeting. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Deputy Mayor McDonald. Seconded? Councillor Richardson. Do you wish to speak to it? No. Anybody? Questions, comments? No, no. Okay, all in favor? And that's passed. 8.3 is the adjournment of the statutory public meeting, so do we need to vote on it? No, we just need to know the time. Okay, that's great. Item 9 is deputations. We have one deputation today. Growth Management Strategy Update relating to item 11.1 on the agenda. And we have Mr. David Johnson and Mr. Jim Webster. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of committee. I'm here to request that Mr. Webster's property under the name of Black Bear Estates, Inc., that he's been trying to develop since 2003, he was clean shaven at the time, be recognized in the municipal comprehensive strategy. Further, that a reasonable allocation of residential growth be assigned to the property. Since his original OPA application in 2006, and subdivision application in 2007, Mr. Webster has dealt with 7 different directors of planning or general managers and 4 different directors or managers of engineering. Over the years and through evolving provincial policies, he has attempted to work cooperatively with staff, with staff and follow their advice. This includes a request to reactivate the previous file for the official plan and subdivision in May of 2024. He's also agreed to delay any pre-consultation requests until after the MCS has been dealt with by council. Previously, city files have been misplaced to the extent that reports have been written that totally ignore both Mr. Webster's OPA and the subdivision application. This has been frustrating. Equally frustrating has been dealing with the disposition of Fenelon Falls Secondary Plan OPA 15. Mr. Webster's Black Bear property was initially included in the secondary plan, accepted by the community, and adopted by council and submitted to the province. In response to the province's direction to reduce the total amount of land that was designated for residential development, Mr. Webster's property was removed from the urban designation without Mr. Webster being given any notice of the city's intention, nor was he given any opportunity to make representation to council as to why the designation should be retained. Despite his request, no land needs assessment report was forwarded for his review. Mr. Webster is unaware of any report given to council justifying the specific removal of his land. While the land was removed, other lands which did not meet provincial policy requirements of the day for full municipal services were retained. There didn't appear to be any consideration of provincial policy requirements for that detail, nor any attempt to share the burden of reducing the designations with other development interest. Mr. Webster took these concerns to council in March of 2018, and council directed that staff meet with Mr. Webster to provide an explanation of what the city had done. We have yet to have that meeting. Nevertheless, we are where we are, and Mr. Webster wishes to continue with the development of the lands. The lands themselves are immediately abut the built-up boundary of the former village and represent a logical extension to the village with full municipal services immediately available at 2 separate locations. We hope that council would recognize the commitment that was made when OPA 15 was adopted as a priority and wish to restore the development potential that was extinguished when the designation was removed. In the May 2024 interim report, the MCS stated that Fenelon Falls urban settlement area is deficient in area by 38 hectares to meet the projected needs to 2051. The interim report further stated that a map showing where these allocations would be located would be provided. Mr. Webster has yet to see this map. We're here today to urge committee to ensure that the residential marketplace is encouraged to be competitive through associated residential growth in the municipal comprehensive strategy. To our knowledge, Black Bear Estates and the former Fenelon Trails property are the only developers actively seeking to expand the urban settlement boundaries in the Fenelon Falls settlement area. It seems very ironic that the province required the city to reduce the areas identified for urban development, and now consultants' reports are in front of you that suggest that we're deficient by 38 hectares to meet the needs of 2051. Common sense would suggest that Mr. Webster should have his designation restored to his property and an allocation of population assigned through the MCS. Such an approach would provide,
Couldn't I get you to wrap up, please?
for a competitive marketplace. Mr. Mayor and members of committee, if the MCS update does not allocate residential growth to the Black Bear lands, we strongly urge committee to refer the study back to staff with direction that Black Bear be allocated residential growth to reflect the lands that were formally designated and originally adopted in the Fenelon Falls Secondary Plan. Thank you. Appreciate your
Thank
attention.
you. If you stay there in case there are any questions, I'll get a motion to receive the deputation. Councillor Joyce, Councillor Perry, any questions for the deputant? Before we vote on it, Ms. Barry, did you wish to say anything about the growth management study in Fenelon Falls and Mr. Johnson's deputation?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, for the opportunity. Yeah, so I would encourage our deputants and Mr. Webster as well to stay for the forthcoming presentation where our consulting team, the project team, will provide an update to council and the community about where the growth management strategy project is at and what steps still lie ahead. There were a couple of things that I heard that for perhaps the well, as an aid to council, maybe we'll just touch on a couple of pieces there, provided I heard these correctly. I myself, as well as colleagues of mine in my department and others, have met with Mr. Webster and his consulting team on numerous occasions over the past few years. I am certainly one of those members of staff that Mr. Johnson referred to that has been added to a lengthy list of staff over the last number of years. Certainly Mr. Webster's interest in developing his lands far exceeds the staff, the tenure of staff who've been involved with the project. We have certainly recognized that. So we have not only met with and reviewed the matters that Mr. Johnson has brought forward today, we have also shared all of the information regarding the GMS project, including the updates to council, the discussions at the task force, the presentations from the task force meetings, as well as the technical memo, which we will be presenting in more detail later this afternoon. I'm aware that Mr. Webster and his colleagues and consultants were also involved in the Ontario Land Tribunal at the time, perhaps the Local Planning Appeals Tribunal, for a number of years, and were part of all those discussions and proceedings, and were encouraged to file appeals of decisions when the tribunal directed a new set of statutory public meetings. So we do think that we have both worked with and opportunities to become involved in the project and in the appeals has been on the table for Mr. Webster and his groups. Just maybe a small point in terms of perhaps what appears a bit ironic about the request of the province to shrink up boundaries, and here we are now presenting opportunities to expand them. Very, very good point, and yes, I agree it. On the surface does look a bit wacky. The GMS and the policies in the official plan that speak to the existing boundaries of the urban areas, including Fenelon Falls. These were based on forecasted population and employment numbers to the year 2031. And at that time, there was a need to shrink up the designated lands because those lands weren't needed. Now, we're required to forecast out to 2051. And so there was a deficit that was determined through the land needs assessment, and that is how we have now sort of landed on this 38 hectare deficit that we are looking to add lands to the boundary of Fenelon Falls on. So I hope that helps clarify a few things, and thanks for the opportunity.
So the bottom line here is we're still in the GMS. We're still dealing with the 38 hectares. We hear you loud and clear. The director is cognizant of the things that are going on, and I know that we have met with the director on one or more occasions, so we'll continue to move forward, and we won't forget you. And,
Thank you so much.
okay. Councillor Yeo, do you have a question or a comment?
Well, I wasn't going to comment until you opened the door to staff for some background. And I don't know how deep I want to get into this, but there's a bad taste left in a lot of people's mouths when we did when we shrunk the village outline and stuff and took some people out of there. And those people were not all given the opportunity to go to the LPAT and to be a member of all that went on in the OMB. And so just, my memory is just as good as the next person. So don't just brush it off as, oh, we've done what we had to do. There was a lot of bad feelings and bad taste in mouths left on that. And that's just wanted to make that comment, and that's where I'll leave it, because if we open the door again, I know I'll probably get as passionate as I was at the time where I disagreed with it. So just to let my thoughts be known. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a motion on the floor to receive the deputation. All in favor? And that's received. Thank you. I hope you stick around for the update on the GMS. Item 10 is correspondence, and we have none. Item 11 is presentations, and item 11.1 is Ms. Barry, the Growth Management Strategy Update presentation.
Great, thanks, Mr. Mayor, appreciate that. So we are now at the point in the agenda, not a long delay at all from my earlier comments. In fact, I'm joined by my colleagues here on the Zoom screen, we can see. Joining me to deliver our growth management strategy update today is managing partner at Watson & Associates Economists Limited, Jamie Cook. Shayla Taku joins us as well, a consultant from Watson's, and in my opinion, the real core and nerve center of this whole operation, who keeps everything moving behind the scenes. Joining us today also is Rory Botch, and Rory is a partner with Dillon Consulting Limited. We have presented to council in the past, so you are familiar with this group of professionals who join us on the project team. And without further ado, I will turn things over to Jamie. Jamie, good afternoon, and thanks for being here, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Leah. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of committee and staff. So as Leah introduced earlier, just a few minutes ago, we are going to provide you an update of the growth management strategy. So I'm going to get my colleague Shayla Taku to upload the presentation. I think it's Shayla running this. Okay, all right. And so we're going to essentially walk you through the draft preliminary technical findings and the preliminary strategic recommendations of this study. So that's the intent of today's presentation. We're going to keep it fairly brief in the interest of time. So in terms of the agenda on the first slide, wanted to provide you a bit of a brief update of the project. We're not going to spend too much time on the growth forecasts and land needs because you've gone through that several times with us, but we do want to recap that. Then we'll speak to the phasing of the DGA lands, including the MZO lands in Lindsay. We're going to get into a discussion with Rory on the location options for community area expansion in Fallon Falls and Bobcaygeon. Then I'm going to come back to talk about employment area land needs, location options and expansion recommendations, and then we'll wrap it up with conclusions and next steps. So on the next slide, we just wanted to lay out the schedule. We've been working together as a team on this project for quite some time. The last time that we met was in May of this year, and at that point we met with you to provide you with some of the preliminary findings of the technical analysis of the study after a fairly lengthy pause that occurred during 2003. That pause was a result of a number of reforms with respect to provincial planning policy. We also had several MZOs that were being reviewed and considered, and that required us to take a pause. We then went back to restart the work in November of 2023. Then we presented those findings, as I mentioned, in the spring. So today we're here to build on those findings, as well as to provide you with some further directions with respect to the strategic recommendations regarding urban expansion options, particularly in phasing. We also provided a memo back in October of this year to provide some of the highlights of the study, because the study is so involved, there's so much information, and it's taken quite a while to get through it. We wanted to give council, members of the public, stakeholders, and all those involved essentially a sneak peek at what the draft results are leaning towards, and help everyone understand where the study's heading. With respect to next steps, we are essentially trying to turn the corner into the end of the year and next year to finish the study. We do plan to meet one more time with the task force in either December or January this year. And then the goal is to release a draft report, most likely a publicly released report and draft in the first quarter, the early first quarter of next year in January, and then wrap the report up by the end of Q1. So on the next slide, I just wanted to recap the growth forecasts, sort of the overall framework for growth. So we've talked about this at length, and just want to remind the committee today that we are planning for a significant amount of population growth over the next 30 years to the horizon 2051. We started off with a forecast that was laid out by the provincial growth plan at 117,000. Given the significant development pressure and growth pressure that we're seeing in the city of Kawartha Lakes, we have ultimately gone with a high growth scenario. So we're at 130,000 people by 2051. This is a forecast that I feel represents a very ambitious rate of growth. It represents the high end range of potential population growth for the city of Kawartha Lakes. But we do feel that given the significant development pressure that the city is under, looking at outward growth pressure from the Greater Toronto Area, and the potential opportunities associated with active development applications, vacant lands, intensification opportunities, and the MZOs, that this is an achievable forecast, but certainly an ambitious one. To accommodate that population, we're also identifying a significant increase in the employment base. We're projecting an overall employment forecast of just over 40,000 employees, which is an increase of about 17,000 jobs between 2021 and 51, across a range of sectors related to commercial, industrial, institutional, work at home, and other off-site employment. So to accommodate the population forecast, we're projecting a housing forecast of just under 49,000. That's an increase of just under 22,000 households over that period. So that works out to about 720 households a year on an annual basis if you were to average it. That's about 2.5 times the rate of growth that the city's been experiencing over the last 20 years. So it's a significant amount of growth. It is relatively consistent with the municipality's housing pledge. When we add potential growth related to latent housing demand, so demand that is also required not only to accommodate population growth, but the needs of existing residents who aren't ultimately being housed to their existing needs, we feel we are in the range of meeting that pledge target over the next 10 years with this high scenario. So then moving forward to the urban land needs analysis on the next slide. We've now finished the analysis. We've updated it within the context of the current in-force 2024 provincial planning statement. This planning statement provides us with the ability to project growth over a period of 20 to 30 years. So we're projecting out to 2051. So from 21, it represents a 30-year period. So we're in that range of what is provided or permitted by the province. The province's updated 2024 PPS is intentionally meant to be a less prescriptive, more outcome-based approach to land use planning and urban growth management, and generally growth management in general for Ontario municipalities. There aren't prescriptive guiding documents as there was under the previous framework, but there is guidance that's provided. And we have followed that guidance, and we feel that ultimately the forecast has been, and the analysis has been carried out appropriately. One of the things that the PPS does identify is that growth is to be directed to fully serviced settlement areas. And so accordingly, we've identified about 90% of the population, housing, and employment growth to be allocated to the fully serviced settlement areas of Lindsay, Bobcaygeon, and Fenelon Falls. The remaining 10% has been allocated to the area of Omemee, as well as the city's remaining rural settlement areas and remaining rural area. So under this high scenario, we've also identified a intensification target of 20%. That is a recommended alternative from the current approach, or the current target of 30% for the city. We do feel that this reduction does represent a more appropriate level of growth, specifically when you consider the amount of population and housing that is being contemplated for the city as a whole. This target we feel is more appropriate. In terms of greenfield density, we've identified an average density of 45 people and jobs per hectare, which would represent a gradual increase in the densities that are currently being experienced in each of the settlement areas, and the combined density that's being achieved. So with all that analysis, we have identified a surplus when we include the MZO lands in Lindsay of 329 hectares, but we have identified small shortfalls, as we've heard, in Fenelon Falls of 38 hectares and 23 hectares in Bobcaygeon. We also have a surplus of 50 hectares in Omemee. I also just wanted to point out that it is recognized that the city's hamlets and rural areas do have an important role to play in accommodating future development within the city, subject to available land supply, supporting infrastructure, and the scale of development that we're planning for these areas. However, the needs of the study are focusing on the city's fully serviced urban settlement areas under the context of provincial policy. A further review of the rural settlement boundaries may be undertaken through the city's official plan review process at a later date. On the next slide, we point out the phasing schedule particularly for the designated greenfield areas of Lindsay. So because there's so much development that we're identifying in Lindsay, and essentially there's more supply opportunities than there is demand to the year 2051, even under this high scenario, we do feel it's important to develop a phasing approach to logically and systematically direct where growth in the greenfield areas should be, how it should occur, at what time. So you can see all the lands that are identified outside of the red line in this map essentially are either designated greenfield lands or their potential expansion areas that are associated with MZOs. So through a series of criteria that we've established, working with the city's engineering and planning departments, as well as the city's engineering consultants as part of their water and wastewater master plan, we've identified 3 broad phases for development. The 24 to 31 period, which essentially includes the majority of lands that are located within active plans of subdivision. These lands are either municipally serviced or serviceable in the near term, and they're directly located outside of the existing built-up area of the Lindsay settlement area. The next phase is 21 to 31. This represents largely inactive designated lands, so lands that are within the designated greenfield area but do not have an active application. It also includes certain approved MZO lands that are located within the existing urban boundary of the Lindsay settlement area, generally adjacent to the existing built-up area. And you can see those lands are identified in orange. And if I wasn't clear, the first phase is the lands identified in the yellow. The last phase are the lands that are identified in brown. This includes the remaining MZO lands located outside of the urban settlement area boundary. And you can see those lands identified again in brown. On the next slide, I just wanted to point out that, again, we do have a surplus of lands within the designated greenfield area, including the MZOs in Lindsay. So in total, we have about 6,600 potential units that are identified through the Flato and Bromont MZOs. And so with that additional supply opportunity that has been reviewed, assessed, and evaluated under this growth management strategy, we have essentially more than enough land to work with for the long term to 2051 and beyond, even under this high scenario. Now, so as a result, we have looked at other applications for urban expansion within Lindsay, but we're not recommending any other expansions at this time. However, we do note in the memo and in the report, we will identify that while we're not projecting or identifying immediate urban expansion in Lindsay, that we will be developing a recommended policy framework to ensure that additional candidate sites for urban expansion in Lindsay can be reviewed if significant delays result in the timing of developing and servicing associated lands related to these MZOs. So that's something that has been pointed out and will continue to be pointed out in the report. I'm going to turn it over to Rory, who's now going to walk through the urban expansion options for Fenelon Falls and Bobcaygeon.
Thanks very much, Jamie, and good afternoon to council, other members of the community and staff. I'll speak to the community expansion options for both Bobcaygeon and Fenelon Falls. As you've heard earlier from Jamie, through the course of the growth management strategy, we open the door to receive requests for any interested property owner to express an interest in regards to being a participant in this process and identifying land that they believed might be suitable for future development. We have a technical analysis framework that we have used consistently for well over 2 decades, which incorporates the policy direction provided by the province, primarily through the planning framework we work with, and today that's called the Provincial Planning Statement, as well as the policies that are expressed in the current City of Kawartha Lakes official plan. And I'd like to speak with you then further in regards to how those take shape in terms of the formative recommendations at this particular time as it relates to the growth management strategy. The key thing that I'd like to emphasize in regards to the process is while growth management strategy work provides the direction, in all cases in municipalities, it does not create the final endpoint. The final endpoint materializes through an official plan update of some form in every municipality in Ontario. And so there's always an opportunity to liaise further, have another conversation, look at some new information if there's merit in considering some alternative that may still be out there and that could very well be viable. And so that process remains to be before us as we continue forward. But let's take a look at the first of the 2 communities, namely Bobcaygeon. So as you heard Jamie say, there's a justification to add 23 more hectares of greenfield designated land to facilitate further growth in Bobcaygeon in alignment with the forecasts out to 2051. Right now, the direction in the growth management strategy is to allow for an expansion in 2 locations. So as you see with the stars at the north east portion of town, there's an area of land there that is immediately abutting existing built-up area and could be serviced. And then on the north and west side of town, there's also a small area where there'd be the opportunity to continue some further development as it relates to development activity already occurring in that particular part of the community. Until we find ourselves seeing a little bit of constraint as it relates to some environmental feature, but there is an opportunity there. The other perspective in Bobcaygeon is in the south. 2 landowners have come forward expressing an interest in seeing their lands developed, including one property right up against the shoreline that was previously the subject of a plan of subdivision, which has in the passage of time lapsed. But we do want to encourage both to potentially have an opportunity to develop and create that good competitive land market in Bobcaygeon and create options for those that want to come and be part of the Bobcaygeon community. So figuring out how to rationalize the ultimate amount of land that would be shared between those 2 adjoining properties is work to come in the future, but that's currently on the table in terms of where we see things moving forward. Next, I'll move on to Fenelon Falls. And so the important thing to understand with regards to Fenelon Falls is the irregular shape that we currently see as it relates to Fenelon Falls' urban boundary. So as part of settling the secondary plan appeal, we essentially had to rewind the clock back to the old shape of the boundary, although there had been a variety of different shapes that had been discussed over the years through 2012 and onwards. The settlement basically brought the boundary back to this irregular shape. In particular, if you focus on the far right-hand side of that top map, that kind of curvilinear, bumpy shape that we see on the east side of Fenelon Falls. So that does not align to any property boundaries, and that's definitely something that needs to be done as part of the upcoming official plan review that springboards from the GMS. It's reshaping that boundary, essentially moving the total amount of the area around such that it's better aligned to real property boundaries. Once that step has been completed, the next thing to do is to then look at expanding the boundary as it relates to where there's an opportunity for viable development. I've known it for many years as Fenelon Trails. It's now under different ownership and is known as a different project, but there's a very substantial development application that's been provided to the city, and that development application would be able to absorb some of that 38-hectare urban expansion, if not all of it. We've already heard earlier, just a few minutes ago, that there's other interests in developing in Fenelon Falls, and as you've heard me say, the door remains open for further conversation in regards to other interests as we move through the course of this growth management strategy and look towards implementing the ultimate work through an official plan update of some kind. But that does give us a good foundation in both Bobcaygeon and Fenelon Falls to accommodate future growth and development and help achieve the vision for the communities and their sustainable growth through to 2051. Jamie, back to you for employment.
Thanks, Rory. So we're now going to turn our attention to the employment land needs analysis and expansion options. So similar to the residential analysis, we have identified that there are some needs for future urban employment expansion within the city, and in this case, within Lindsay. So as we've noted, there's a significant amount of population and housing growth that we're planning for within the city of Kawartha Lakes, and we want to ensure that we are balanced between both residential and non-residential development. This is a critical objective of the city from a planning and growth management perspective as the city continues to mature and grow over the next 3 decades and beyond. And this policy is also echoed in the provincial planning statement of 2024, which does identify that planning authorities should support the achievement of complete communities by accommodating a range and mix of uses, including employment areas. So in order to provide to meet this objective, we have looked at a long-term need for the city, and we've identified that Lindsay would ultimately be developing a shortfall of employment lands over the long term. Now, the one difference with the PPS 2024 is that it does allow us to look beyond the 30-year planning horizon when it comes to employment, as well as infrastructure and infrastructure services and municipal services and facilities. So we can look beyond 30 years, and we think it is appropriate to do that and designate these lands, or at least signal the need to be designated these lands at some point in the near future to ensure that we do have this appropriate balance between residential and non-residential development. At this time, we're recommending an expansion of just over 40 hectares within the Lindsay settlement area. We're not anticipating and recommending any further expansions for employment areas in Fenelon Falls and Bobcaygeon or Omemee. And again, just so everyone's aware, when we say employment areas, we're talking generally at or about industrial development. So these are lands that are designed to accommodate almost now, under the current definition of employment area under the PPS and the Planning Act, almost exclusively industrial development with some ancillary uses to support that would be commercial or non-industrial to support that parent function. We also think it's important for the land absorption of industrial land to be monitored on a regular basis. I would suggest annually. We want to ensure that the city has a sufficient supply of land, not only the long term, but you're also meeting requirements to ensure that you have shovel-ready service lands on an annual basis, and we would recommend for at least up to a 5-year period that you have service lands. So that's also something that we're recommending be undertaken as a monitoring program. So on the next slide, we've identified 2 potential location options for potential urban expansion. The first site is option 1, which you can see is in the northeast area of the settlement area of Lindsay. It's located east of CKL Road 36. It's in an area that is adjacent to an existing employment area. It also would represent a transition from an existing rural part of the area would be an existing rural employment area that would transition over time to a fully serviced urban employment area over the planning horizon. The other option that we have looked at is a site that's located, you can see in the southwest, west of Highway 735, south of Kent Road. And this is also another area that would serve as a logical extension of an existing industrial area within the Lindsay settlement area. So we've looked at these 2 sites, we've evaluated them with respect to broad municipal servicing considerations, impacts on natural heritage and agriculture, growth management, and land use planning considerations, as well as market analysis. We do feel that both these sites are appropriate sites to be looked at. They ultimately do possess a number of attributes that would make them viable for employment area development. They're contiguous. They're located within established employment areas within the Lindsay area. They're located in proximity to the BUA, the built-up area. They should offer logical extension of services to these areas. They're marketable given their proximity and visible to the respective highway corridors that they're located along. They potentially offer a critical mass for a range of employment uses, including large land extensive uses that may be required over the long term. They're also located within proximity to existing commercial services to provide that additional benefit for workers who may be looking for amenities during off hour times. As I noted, the option 1 would represent a logical transition of an existing rural employment area. So these are the 2 sites that we've identified. We have not recommended one of the sites as of this time. We are recommending that further work would likely need to be done to assess the servicing aspects of these 2 options before we can make a final recommendation. On the next slide, I wanted to then just wrap up with conclusions and next steps. So with respect to conclusions, as we've noted, we do have more than enough land to work with in the Lindsay settlement area, including the MZOs, even under this high scenario. So we're not recommending any further urban expansions within the Lindsay settlement area at this time. We've noted that we are ensuring that there's flexibility that's written into the policies of the official plan to ensure that if significant delays occur with the development of these MZOs, that other options can be explored. As we've noted, there are shortfalls of urban land identified in Fenelon Falls and Bobcaygeon of 38 hectares and 23 hectares, respectively, and we're exploring location options, as we've discussed today, to accommodate that need. In addition, we've identified just over 40 hectares of employment area land to be considered in Lindsay. And as I've noted, while the focus of the study continues to be on the city's urban system, we do recognize the importance of the city's hamlets and rural areas and the important role that they play. And so there could be additional work that could be undertaken through the course of the official plan to consider if any further adjustments need to be made in those areas. But we would not recommend undertaking a comprehensive review such as we've done here. It would largely be based on broader planning considerations if any adjustments are deemed necessary in the rural system with respect to boundaries. So in terms of next steps, as I mentioned, we did provide a memo to ultimately to council and externally to all stakeholders regarding the technical findings of the study and the preliminary strategic recommendations, which we're speaking to today. We are planning to release the draft report to staff this month. It is a large report and it will require some time to review. ultimately, we do want to get in front of the task force one more time, as I mentioned, either later this year or early next year, before we release the draft report early next year, and look forward to wrapping up this study that has been a very interesting and very rewarding study, but a very lengthy one. And we do want to get to the finish line, and we do plan to get there in Q1 of 2025. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to turn it over to committee for questions.
Thank you. Let's get a motion to receive the presentation. I have Councillor Ashmore, Councillor Perry, and questions, Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, I just want to do a point of clarification. I am the counselor for this task force, so I'm pretty adverse of what's been going on during this whole time. Maybe just, today is basically showing us where we're too small and where we're too big, and how we've seen some recommendations today about right-sizing those. But when it comes down to it, council will have that option to redraw, reshape these urban boundaries through the official plan update. I just want to ask for that point of clarification moving forward.
Councillor Warren.
Through you, that was my question too, in that when is that going to happen with the OP update, and how soon after that would the deficit be addressed?
Director?
Sure, thanks for the opportunity to address the questions. And Councillor Richardson, thank you. Your participation on the task force has been nothing short of great, very involved, very interested, so thank you for that. The question around the delineation of the boundaries, you're absolutely right, and I'll echo the comments by our project team as well during the presentation, that what we're getting in the GMS product, if I can call it that, the deliverable, the final report, is going to give council a very informed, based on science and planning principles for most logical extensions of the urban areas that are also based on the feedback that we received from the community. Okay, so that would be a guiding document, a very substantial input into the official plan review process, which is targeted to initiate in 2025. So that hopefully gives you a little bit of idea on time frame in terms of the forthcoming process with that official plan project. Absolutely, in addition to the GMS project and product that we'll have to really lean on and use to help us, and by us I mean everybody around the table and the community, to understand how we landed on the suggested expansions, as well as the strategic policy direction that's going to be written into the final GMS, that we use that and incorporate that into the official plan. But at the end of the day, and through the official plan process, which also includes a very thorough and comprehensive public engagement process, not just because it's a statutory requirement of the Planning Act, it is that, but also it is the only way to write and develop an official plan for the community with that type of input from the community. Just to sort of underscore that point, the GMS is a highly, forgive me, Rory, and any other planners listening, economic exercise. It is very quantitative. It is based on a rigorous land needs assessment formula and methodology set by the province. So that's an important distinction to all the other factors that also go into developing a new official plan. Mr. Mayor, if I haven't touched on any other questions that were asked, you'll let me know.
Thank you, I will. Councillor Joyce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I just want to express some frustration. We've had this conversation before with planning. The use of acronyms, it's not just me and maybe some other councillors, but the public is watching too. So you talk about DGA, PPS, OP. I happen to know most of those. I figured out DGA on slide 5. I still don't know what a BUA is. So when you use an acronym, use an asterisk and spell it out so that everybody can follow along and understand what's going on. So what is a BUA?
Mr. Mayor,
To you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor,
Leah, did you want me to respond to that?
with reference to the slide in the presentation, we'll let Jamie cover that one.
Sure.
Thank
Please
you.
do.
So the BUA, and I appreciate the comment. It has been expressed before. We will definitely make sure that all the acronyms are clearly spelled out. We have a glossary of terms in the report that will also further provide guidance to all the use of acronyms. And we're also flexible if the city does not want to use acronyms. There's just so many terms. Ultimately, we're trying to shorten the number of words, but we need to be clear. The BUA is just short for the built-up area. So the built-up area is essentially an area that was delineated by the province back in 2006 when the growth plan was established. And it essentially represents the area where all areas were built out or essentially building out at that time of 2006. That boundary has been held consistent since that time, and we're continuing to use that boundary as the definition of the built-up area and the definition of intensification.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ashmore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Director Barry. In the presentation, we talked about employment lands within the town of Lindsay specifically, and there was a minus 44 hectares. So over the years, we've had, as an example, Bromont, they had that land, but through various time constraints and frustrations, I guess they converted it, they applied to go to residential, because at one time, like, we do need these businesses like Walmart, we need other anchor stores and other commercial enterprises. But sometimes are we not our own, I hate to use the expression, but worst enemy, that we're actually converting commercial lands, which we need, or employment lands as it's called, we're converting it into residential. So hence the shortfall that we have. Would that not be an accurate depiction of what's happened over the years, where we had those expansion lands for employment, but we converted them over to, or we rezoned them over to residential instead?
Who would like to answer that?
I can take a first stab at that, Leah, through you, Mr. Mayor, through committee. I think that it's a very valid point that's being raised by the conversion of employment lands. Anytime we do convert employment areas to non-employment uses, we obviously are removing supply from the employment area base, and we're further limiting the ability to accommodate industrial development or employment lands development. But it's also important to recognize that there may be times when it is appropriate to convert a site. So there could be lands that are ultimately not well positioned for industrial uses. It could be because of a previous planning decision. It could be because of changes to ultimately the market potential of an area, or the lands maybe were not very well suited to begin with. So we have gone through and we have looked at a number of sites that are, in our opinion, candidates for employment conversion, and we have identified some sites to be converted. And the province ultimately lays out a policy framework for that process. So ultimately, the province's previous PPS and the current provincial planning statement does set out a number of policies that are ultimately designed to protect employment areas from conversion, but ultimately conversions can still take place if they're identified, if the merits for those conversions are identified. So ultimately, we do want to ensure that we preserve employment areas, and we don't want to be hasty in our approach to convert employment areas. And so generally, we take a protectionist approach to protecting and preserving employment areas, knowing that they may take a while to absorb, but ultimately, once they're converted, they're lost, and we want to ensure that that supply is there over the long term. So we have been very careful to ensure that we are not unduly converting employment area sites. We also want to make sure that the sites we have today and any future sites that we're identifying for employment area development are marketable sites. There are sites that offer opportunity for a broad range of industrial uses by sector and size. We want to ensure that there's lands that can be developed and that ultimately would be, as I've identified, marketable for development. So we think that we've struck in the right balance between identifying some sites that we don't feel are appropriate for an employment or industrial designation. We've identified policies to ensure that the proper approach to conversions is undertaken through a set of criteria that's comprehensive. We also are working with the provincial framework and the local framework to protect existing sites. And then we've also identified where future expansions could occur over the long term through these 2 location options that we've identified. And we feel that that additional 40 hectares will provide a sufficient amount of land to accommodate industrial development for Lindsay over the long term.
Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Richardson.
Thank you. And maybe just to echo on the back end of that as well, is it safe to say that we're not any different than any other municipality right now, because we have completely shifted since the pandemic when it comes to those growth numbers? And I'm pretty sure other municipalities are facing the same type of residential numbers and employment numbers. Are you seeing that trend across Ontario? It's not just us.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we are definitely seeing this trend. We've undertaken numerous municipal comprehensive reviews across the Greater Golden Horseshoe and beyond Ontario. And in many of those larger comprehensive review studies, we've identified sites for review for employment conversion. And again, we take a very protectionist approach to this. We have a set of comprehensive criteria that we review and evaluate against. But I can tell you, for example, in places such as Durham Region, where we conducted extensive work, there was a number of sites that were identified for conversion of employment areas. Some of these areas in Durham are a bit different than the situation in Lindsay, and many of these sites were located in major transit station areas where we're trying to accommodate higher density mixed use opportunities and residential development. But there were some other sites that may be more similar to the situation in Lindsay. And then ultimately in Durham, similar to Lindsay, we are identifying expansion opportunities along strategic highway corridors for future expansion, and looking to ensure that those lands are designated and protected for employment area purposes over the long term. Even if we don't feel that there's a need for those lands in the immediate future, we want to ensure that they are that the vision is established of where we think we want to be targeting industrial development over the long term.
Thank you. Councillor Yeo.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. The consultant mentioned or had a phrase that the Fenelon Falls and Bobcaygeon lands would be looked at alongside an official plan review or of some sort. So my question is around what of some sort means. Could this be done with an official plan amendment at that time? Because as some of us know, our last official plan, I don't even know if it's done yet. Maybe it just finished this year, but I think it was 12 years running. So that certainly adds a timeline that I don't really want to see. So what does that phrase mean, of some sort? Are there other options besides an official plan full review to get this moving? Thank you.
Anybody?
Pleased to speak to that, unless Leah, as director, would like to say a few words first.
Thanks, Roy. Appreciate it. We do have a couple of options, Mr. Mayor, through to the councillor in terms of how sort of the mechanics work around changing boundaries. The 2 conventional ways around doing that are either through a comprehensive official plan review and update, or through a standalone, let's call it a growth management policy amendment, but it would be a standalone official plan amendment separate to the balance of the municipal, or the end of the municipal comprehensive review that you've heard me refer to as the OP review and update. Okay, so those 2 potential avenues can be used. Council can decide which way to go, either a standalone OPA or the more sort of comprehensive look where all factors are considered. And of course, there are pros and cons to each. Timing, costs, resources, potential for appeals, all the juicy stuff that council has heard about and lived through for the past number of years. So it, in my opinion, would be advantageous, along with the final product of the GMS, for us to provide to council better maybe articulation around what the process entails to change the boundaries, if council thinks that would be helpful.
You good with that, Councillor Gill?
Yeah, that would probably be tremendous. Thank you.
I have a question, kind of confusion on my part maybe. I'm trying to not be parochial here, and I'm trying to view this as you termed it, I think, very much an academic exercise, like the background study for the development charges, that kind of thing, that it is very prescriptive and it's scientifically based and all of those things. And all we're getting today is an update. We're not getting, because council receives this, doesn't mean this is what it is. But I had a question around this. When you talked about the Fenelon Falls area, you talked about expanding the boundary for Fenelon Trails to square off Fenelon Falls so that the boundaries didn't have any curvature to it. I'd point out that on the west side of town, there is still some anomalies there. And when I look at what's happening in Lindsay with the MZOs, and I understand they're outside the settlement area, but what you're proposing for the industrial or employment areas changes the boundaries of Lindsay so that they are no longer squared off, but they actually have many jots out. So why would we do that in one location, but strive not to do it in another location? And basically, I mean, I'm sure there are some towns and villages and cities that are probably circular and you know, they're not squared off. So just a question along those lines.
Through the mayor, I'd be pleased to answer that one. The matter relating to Fenelon Falls is less about the concept of it being square and more so about the final reshaping of the boundary to better align with property lines. That's really the message there. It doesn't have to be perfectly square or rectangular or otherwise. What it should actually do is it should align as best as possible to property boundaries. And the reason for that is because it offers better certainty to the individual landowners as to which properties are inside and outside the boundary. And those inside are the ones that we expect to be part of the urban fabric of Fenelon Falls out to 2051. It also is ideal for facilitating how within those subdivisions they're going to then lay out a logical pattern of roads, and then how services would also logically be extended. Basically, those linear infrastructure. They want to work with a logical lot pattern, and all of it boils down to the functional property lines. So that's really the premise. It's getting a boundary to have some relationship, a better relationship in particular for Fenelon Falls to property boundaries, not necessarily being square.
Okay, thanks. So we've had all the questions. Again, I want to reiterate what this is today is an update on the growth management study. You are not approving anything. No, nothing is cast in stone here. We're just receiving a report on where they are with the growth management study, and more will be coming later, and there will be opportunities for changes to boundaries and all of those things. And I'm sure that we will hear from folks as we go forward. So thank you for coming today and for your presentation. We have a mover and seconder, all in favor. And that passes. Does council want to take a break now, or do they want to do the, okay, let's go to 25 to 3. Gives you 9 minutes, okay? Thank you. Thanks. Item 11.2 on the agenda is the Deputy Mayor's Customer Service Initiative presentation. And we'll turn it over to Deputy Mayor McDonald whenever you're ready.
I think I'm ready. Okay, thank you very much, through you. As we go through this, I have just some open remarks, and I'll save a wrap up for the end, but this was all about improving customer service. It kind of started with Councillor Richardson when she was acting deputy mayor the last time to work on a program that was called Did You Know, using the Jump In platform, and that has proven to be a very effective part of customer service. So now that we're midway through our 4 years, for a lot of new people sitting around here, I wanted to look at all the issues that councillors deal with on a regular basis and share this with the departments and come up with some kind of solutions to even better the communication service. I also wanted to learn and share challenges for each department, and has also the opportunities how we can improve our customer service. So let's go through the presentation of these 5 key areas, and I'll do a wrap up at the end. And I'd appreciate that we would try to keep all the questions to the end, because we have 5 speakers here. So if we could keep questions to the end, I'd appreciate it. I'll hand it over to, nope, good. So just the first group now? Huh. Okay. Still me. Identify public-facing services that are offered, review current turnaround times, set targets, establish measurements and reporting, and report the finding back to council. Do I keep on going? Okay. Okay, so good government, provide innovation and efficient service delivery for better customer service. Improve the customer experience by leveraging digital transformation. Provide services through an integrated community hubs, and promote continuous improvement with innovation and make it better. And that's what it's all about in all our service areas. Now we'll get into the customer service. Okay, so the first one on top is, there you go, Brandon.
Perfect. Thank you, Deputy Mayor McDonald. Through you, Mayor Elmsley, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Brandon Clarkson. I'm the Manager of Customer Service. Thank you for having me today. I'm excited to discuss the role of the Customer Service Division in alignment with the Deputy Mayor's Customer Service Initiative. So my portion of this presentation will focus on an overview of customer service, some metrics and KPIs for customer service, and then move on to an overview of case creation and life cycle. Let's get into it. Service centers. So the Customer Service Division is comprised of 13 staff members who support the community and divisions and departments across the city through a number of service channels. This work is conducted in person from our 4 municipal service centers that are located in Lindsay, Bobcaygeon, Omemee, and Cobeconk. This work also extends through the city's corporate call center, which is the main inquiry line for community members to reach the city. Next slide, please. So calls. So this slide provides an overview of the volume of calls received through the city's corporate call center. From January to mid-October, the Customer Service Division received approximately 41,000 calls from approximately 22,000 unique callers. Of the 41,000 calls received, 98.6% of the calls were answered by a customer service team member, which exceeds the service channel target of 95% of calls answered. It's important to note as well, the average call length was 2 minutes and 20 seconds, but we do see call length varying greatly from very short durations to upwards of an hour, depending on the inquiry or need of the customer. Next slide, please. So this slide provides an overview of call volume broken down by month for 2024. You'll see the number on the graph corresponds to the number of calls received for that month. You can see here that the call volumes peaked in May with over 5,200 calls received in that month alone. Next slide, please. This slide provides an overview of how quickly calls are answered, noted in seconds from the time the community member calls the city to the time that they actually speak with a customer experience representative. The service target for this is 20 seconds, and in all months aside from May, the target was met or exceeded. I will note that the 22-second answer speed in May was also the month with the highest number of calls, which probably contributed to a longer wait time for them to speak with a member of our team. Next slide, please. So this slide provides an overview of the total number of financial transactions that were processed at our municipal service centers from January to mid-October of this year. So approximately 15,000 transactions were processed. and those are broken down to 1,644 being for utility billing, 7,030 for property tax, and 6,388 for miscellaneous sales. Miscellaneous sales are comprised of a number of items, including animal tags, permits, accounts receivable, licenses, waste tags, transit passes and tokens, bulk water, and commissioning of documents, just to name a few. Merchandise sales include composters, digesters, and rain barrels, which are also counted in that figure. Next slide, please. So inquiry versus case. So the next few slides are going to discuss our customer relationship management system, our CRM, which is JDE Case. But before we get to that, I wanted to provide an overview of the workflow for inquiries received through customer service. Customer service handles inquiries from the community through a number of channels, including phone, our Report It tool on the website, email, in person, social media, and through our after-hours municipal emergency line. Depending on the nature of the inquiry, the exchange may or may not result in a case being created in JDE Case. General inquiries would not typically be entered into JDE Case because the customer service team is able to answer the inquiry in the moment as the information is readily available to them through their resources or posted on something like the city's website. A case would be created when the inquiry requires the attention of a different division for resolution or for follow-up, or when the inquiry is best answered by a subject matter expert, as long as that division utilizes JDE Case. Next slide, please. So once it's been determined that the inquiry requires the creation of a case in JDE, the customer service team initiates the case creation process. This is done by collecting customer contact information, details of the concern, and then assigns the case and accordingly to the appropriate division for their review, action, and follow-up. And they would connect with the community member. In some instances, like an urgent line contact matter, customer service would connect the inquiry through to the appropriate division for immediate action. And in some cases, that division may create a case or a case may not be created at all. From there, staff in the assigned division will update the status of the case and notes as it goes through their workflow. Status descriptions include open, in progress, on hold, budget considerations, and closed. If a community member contacts customer service through the life cycle of their case, the customer service team will provide updates on their case based on the notes and current case status as entered by the assigned division. Next slide, please. So this slide provides an overview of the volume of cases created over the past 3 years. In 2022, we saw 7,984 cases created. In 2023, that number was 8,854. And up until mid-October of this year, we saw 6,951 cases. It's important to note that, as I mentioned, not all service areas may be on case, but the ones who do utilize case are listed on the left of the slide, including road operations, parks and recreation, engineering, solid waste, water and wastewater, and customer service. Next slide, please. So we just wanted to give you folks a quick overview of the customer request dashboard. If you're not aware of this, this is posted on the city's website, and this information is directly pulled from JDE Case. So this interactive dashboard shows the total number of cases in any given year, the number of cases per ward, the number of cases per division, and the percentage of cases currently assigned to the different case status descriptions that I discussed previously. It also shows the request types on the right-hand side. Next slide, please. This is the customer request map, also available on the city's website, and this information is also pulled directly from JDE Case. On this map, visitors can filter case information by issue type, case status, and dates, as well as location. Visitors can also select the dot that you see depicted on the map to see details of a specific case. Obviously, not all details are disclosed, but does give high-level information. And that is it for me. If you have any questions about my portion, I believe we're saving those to the end. Thank you for your time. It's my pleasure to turn it over to Director Roaz.
Thank you. So the next 4 slides, I'm going to take you through the cases in engineering. And the engineering department does use CASE. Cases are reviewed by our administrative assistant in engineering and assigned accordingly. So specific engineers are sent to the staff engineer overseeing the project, and also assigned to their respective manager. Traffic issues are assigned and may remain open as they require traffic audits and direction from council. Road resurfacing requests are added to a tracking list that is reviewed during the 5-year roads plan creation. It also is reviewed in conjunction with the various in-year budgets or future year budgets. Next slide, please. So in engineering, actually, can you back up one more? Sorry. So the graphic on the right sort of illustrates the number of cases we've had in 2022, 2023, and 2024. So we usually, on average, get about 400, maybe 420, 450 cases a year. Next slide, please. So we're going to look at the three most common cases or topics in engineering. So one is construction issues. So these are active construction issues. So we have a project, whether it's a capital project or a development project, and there is a concern. So different types of construction issues. Again, in engineering, we oversee the construction of bridges, culverts, and roads, resurfacing and reconstruction. So difference between a resurfacing and reconstruction. Reconstruction, we're tearing up the whole road, replacing the curbs and gutters, the sidewalks, the underground infrastructure. A resurfacing, we're just basically doing the wearing surface of the road. And again, water, wastewater, capital projects. So there's two different types of construction. So one is capital, which is what the city owns, assets owned by the city that we are overseeing. The other one is development. So development is assets that we will assume once the development is done. So greenfield residential development, the developer has to, in place the roads, the sewers, the water main, all that stuff. Eventually, we will assume it and take it over, but we do get complaints regarding construction. We do have staff on site reviewing the concerns. There are residents living in a subdivision, and it varies. So in urban centers, a subdivision could last anywhere between 3 and 5 years. In rural areas, it could be up to 10 years. So you will have residents living in that subdivision at various different stages of construction. There's also third-party utilities, Enbridge, telecommunications, high-speed internet that are in our road right-of-way. We issue municipal consents, but we're not in charge of that construction, as well as other roads not within City of Kawartha Lake's jurisdiction. MTL is an example. They have construction. There are construction issues. We try to direct them to the right agency, but it's really outside of the engineering portfolio. All our construction projects will be found on the website. So we list them as soon as the budget is approved. We list the location and an estimate duration of the construction. We also have public meetings leading up to the construction, so the residents are aware. We'll have detour signs, so we try to minimize the impact. The measure, we want a response to complaints for construction within 48 hours, 80% of the time. We have staff on site. So it's a quick turnaround. We either have staff, in-house inspectors, or we consult it out, but there is staff, full-time staff on site during the duration of the construction period. And then you can see the number of complaints in 2020, or number of cases, I shouldn't say complaints, in 2022, 2023, and 2024. Next slide, please. Road issues. So this has nothing to do with construction, so there's no construction going on, but the asset or the road may be not in the greatest shape. So we get a lot of complaints about potholes, general inquiries of road conditions. So they're asking, when is my road scheduled to be resurfaced or reconstructed? Where is it in the 5-year plan? Those are the natures of these inquiries. Again, response to within 48 hours, 80% of the time. We do have, as I mentioned, a 5-year plan, a roads need study. We coordinate with Public Works to see which one should be advanced or which one should have life cycle extension monies associated with them. We list all the roads that we're doing in our in-year budget, so people are aware what's happening next year. We also have a long-term financial plan that has a strategy of how we're going to tackle future roads. So those are basically just inquiries for knowledge. They may or may not like the answer if it's within the 5-year plan, and then there's other avenues they can do to either accelerate or add to their request. Next slide, please. The last ones that I have is warrants, mostly traffic, so traffic calming, speed limits, traffic control. This is seasonal work, so when we get a request for a speed reduction, we need to collect data, which means traffic counts, traffic movements, speed analysis, and we need to capture that data in the right season. Again, we have a peak demand time in Kawartha Lakes where our summer peaks are greatly higher than our winter or off season. So when those requests come in, we need some time to compile data, to do to analyze the request properly. So that's why our warrants, we aim for 80% of the, within 4 months, 80% of the time. We also do have a website. So about 3 months ago, maybe a little longer, on our website, we have a traffic management request sheet. So if you search, or if you just on the search bar, traffic management request under the City of Kawartha Lakes website, we have FAQs for always stops, speed limits, speed bumps, and traffic calming. Those types of warrants will go in there. The procedures there, how you ask for a warrant or petition, which is very helpful for the resident. And I think that's my last slide.
Okay, that brings it to me, municipal law enforcement. So municipal law enforcement, we're kind of the department that ties everything together. We provide enforcement services for all the business units that have enforcement bylaws. We use CityWorks for managing our occurrences. So any complaints that are made through our department, we call them occurrences. We receive occurrences through the phone, through online complaint forms, through emails, through public walk-ins, and letters. On the right-hand side of the screen there is just a yearly breakdown of the occurrences that the officers investigate. So in 2022, we had just about 3,000. 2023, we had 3,800, and 2024, we stand at about 3,100 right now. So our measure of the occurrences, or the phone calls, I should say, that the contact that come into our office is 80%. So when that phone rings, if we are answering it, we're doing so within the first 30 seconds of that person's phone call. And we return messages within 48 hours. So I will mention just on that, around phone calls, staff answer between 50 and 60 phone calls every day. And those phone calls range from 30 seconds to 15 or 20 minutes in some cases. Next slide. So we also have a short-term rental program. So on the licensing side of municipal law enforcement, we have a very new short-term rental program. And early on in the program, we identified a number of pinch points within our processes. Over the period of 2024, we've been able to improve process, and so things like one point of contact for applications, our circulation processes, and within that, we were able to address a backlog of license applications. So the slide here says 350 licenses. I'm happy to report that we're up to 422 licenses as of today, as of the end of October. So the measure there is we're looking to approve or process a license application within 45 days, 80% of the time. Next slide, please. So this is just a representation of the licensing application process, and you can see the improvement along the month to month. So we're now hopefully under the 45-day bar most of the time. Next slide, please. So one of the other enforcement services that we offer is animal control. This slide's dogs at large, but it is domestic animals that we do regulate. Domestic animals are not allowed to run free off of their property and must be walked on a leash when in the public area. So our measure is for dogs, most of the complaints are closed within 21 days of being reported 80% of the time. And so on the right-hand side there, in 2022, we had 182 complaints, 2023, 178 complaints, and 2024, 132 complaints for the year. So just a visual of the measure. This is a great example of our peak periods. We generally have a peak kind of April to September, and you can kind of see that, that curve there. But most of the time we are resolving the issues within 21 days. Next slide. Clean and Clear bylaw. So the Clean and Clear bylaw is a bylaw that regulates property owners to basically keep their properties clean. It doesn't permit owners to accumulate debris on their properties, and provides a definition of all that and process for that. So Clean and Clear complaints, when they're generally closed within 60 days, 80% of the time. So some of the cleanup issues that we encounter can be very complex, as we are a large municipality, and some of our urban properties and our rural properties are large in size. So on the right-hand side there is just the numbers of complaints per year. So 2022, 280 complaints, 2023, 240, 2024, 192. Next slide, I think that's it for me. Oh, just a representation of the graph there. So under 60 days, as I've said, most complaints are closed within that time period. Capacity and complexity will cause some fluctuation in that.
All right, so over to planning. We receive in planning about 7,400 inquiries a year. We take inquiries every day, and they come in all forms, by email, by phone, by walk-ins at the Development Services Department counter at 180 Kent in Lindsay, and at other service counters as well. For 180 Kent, the frontline building and septic division staff attend at the ground floor counter, and they'll call up to planning on the second floor for further action if that's needed. So on occasion, the admin team can answer the inquiry without further direction. The rest of the inquiries are triaged by the planning administration team to assign to the appropriate member of staff. The inquiry is, the member inquiring, the member of the public inquiring is notified that their inquiry has been received, so they get that initial confirmation. They're provided with the name and contact details of the staff member who will be taking carriage of the inquiry, and they're also advised upfront of the city's customer service standard for a further response within about 48 hours. We think this is important to attempt to at least manage some expectations on turnaround right at the outset. In addition to sort of planning related inquiries, we also get about 900 inquiries a year that aren't related to the planning division operations, and those are inquiries that need to be redirected. Our administrative staff answer if they can, but otherwise they need to redirect to the appropriate department or division. Obviously that can cause delays and can frustrate the member of the public inquiring, but it also impacts the planning division's service delivery. Planning hasn't historically been integrated into the JDE case software, and instead tracks inquiries using email or other software tools like the CityWorks application. Some management sources for raw data like, wait for it, Excel spreadsheets, actually quite good at times, and that's how we document the occurrences that we collect. There are days where planning acknowledges inquiries within the same workday 100% of the time, meaning every call, every email, and every walk-in is acknowledged the same day. We know it's not reasonable to use that as a measure when other factors are considered, like when a call isn't answered on first attempt because the line is in service helping another customer, or when staff are in training or in meetings, or obviously when the inquiry comes in after work hours. So based on our current practices, we think the measure to acknowledge inquiries within 48 hours, 95% of the time, is realistic when we take into account the average volumes, of course, when weekends and statutory holidays are considered. Can we get the next slide, please? So building on the content in the previous slide, more often than not, the planner on duty is assigned the daily inquiry by the administration team. Although many inquiries are resolved within 2 days and on occasion the same day, there are many complex inquiries that we receive in planning, and they require a greater degree of, for example, collaboration with our colleagues in other departments. Sometimes they require additional research or a request from the Record Center to get old archived records. So we endeavor to notify inquirers if this is anticipated to be the case, but really we should strive to follow up within 48 hours, at least 80% of the time. And we'll just move to the next slide to wrap things up. We already know anecdotally that our admin team is able to resolve some inquiries on first contact. Going forward, it's valuable data to start tracking to more effectively report out on exactly that, and to possibly support an improvement in another department's operations. After all, we're all in this together, looking to help each other out and ultimately serve the community better. This is fun, Brenda and Councillor McDonald, this round robin approach. I'm going to throw it over to Director Johnson.
Thanks. I'm going to chat about the initiative that we looked at, which was the Urban Tree Service. So within Parks and Recreation, we look after tree concerns in Lindsay, Bobcaygeon, and Fenelon Falls. Lindsay receives the most calls of the 3 areas, with approximately 200 a year. Next slide, Sarah. Over the past few years, the backlog of tree cases has increased, and that's a result of, can be a result of weather events, human resources, manual tracking processes, things of that nature can really impact the backlog. Tessa Smith, the Forestry and Horticultural Operations Supervisor, has prioritized the backlog since April and has managed to reduce the number of cases by 270. Some of the tactics used to reduce the backlog include utilizing contractors. We had an increase in staff in that area. We updated the processes, and we prioritized the work based on location. This initiative certainly helped identify that priority. And so in the next slide, you'll see what we did was we identified in 3 different areas: a high priority, a medium priority, and a low priority. So we will be collecting we identified targets, and we will be reporting on the success of this moving forward. But so based on a high priority tree concern, which would be something of significant health and safety concern, which an example of that would be a broken limb, potentially over a sidewalk. Those issues would be resolved within 2 weeks, 80% of the time. With if an immediate health issue or hazard was identified, that would be resolved within 48 hours. Moving to the medium priority trees, those issues have a target of being resolved within 1 month, 80% of the time. And there's an example of a medium priority case, which would be a limb that's on the ground. It's not necessarily, doesn't have the same health and safety concern as the high priority. Moving to the low priority trees, these are ones that, you know, might be a request of pruning, or it might be a smaller sized branch that may need to be removed. Really, the safety concern here is quite low. So those concerns have a target of being resolved within 3 months, 80% of the time. So staff are currently following the process of when a case comes in, going out and inspecting the tree and identifying whether it's a high, medium, or low priority, and then working to those targets. We will be working with this team and moving forward to develop a method to track and measure the work, as it currently doesn't exist for this type of case that comes in. So Director Robinson is got Mike next.
Thank you to council. Going through the roads operations. So originally we had talked about all areas of public works, but came down to focus on several areas. We'll go through those now. As you can see the numbers on the side there, it's probably the highest case count I would say by far within the city is roads operations. Almost 70% of all cases are related to roads. The highest volumes including pothole ditching, drainage, grading, and road conditions in general. Cases are assigned to appropriate supervisor for resolution. So as indicated previously, they'll come in through either online inquiries or through the customer service portal or other venues, and they will make it to the roads operations staff at our within our group, the operations admin, and the admins will determine which area, which supervisor is responsible to get signed out, and accordingly. So it's a large portion of the operational business. Next slide. Potholes are probably again one of the largest areas. The most common case issue by far, but definitely within our area. Pothole repair is regulated through minimum maintenance standards. Council's heard us talk about that in the past. It's a provincially regulated document that identifies for municipalities their state of repair for roads. So if we meet those obligations within the minimum maintenance standards, we're considered to be in a state of repair. So repair times depend on the road classification and size of the pothole. I think we've explained to this in council in the past. Depending on the road surface type, the size of the pothole, the volume of traffic on the road, there's different obligations, different requirements for response to those roads. Most potholes are identified through our routine patrol, but again, residents are active in reporting those through our case and our other processes as well. So you can see the number of pothole cases is declining over time, started with 1,265 back in 2022, and as of October 24, we're 793. Road condition is, again, that's just similar to what Director Rojas was talking about for general road condition, as opposed to complain about a specific pothole. Again, floating around that 300 to 350 mark for those cases. Next item. Next slide. So this is the table I was referring to. We don't have Class 1 highways. Class 1 highways would be deemed to be like the 400 series highways, the 401, 404, those types of things. We have a couple of Class 2 roads, again, an 800 centimeter square pothole that's 8 centimeters deep. We would have 4 days repair on a Class 2 road. Again, a high volume roads. Down to a Class 5 road, 1,000 centimeters, so slightly bigger pothole, 8 centimeters deep, we have 30 days. And so one of the things to note is we patrol those roads on a 30-day cycle, and then when we identify a pothole, we have 30 days to fix that pothole. So if a pothole, in theory shows up the day after we patrol a road, it could be up to 60 days on a Class 5 road before we're back to repair that incident. Likely doesn't take that long, but that's the time frame that could happen when we're looking at those roads. So on the non-paved surface of the roadway, so that would be on our gravel roads, you can see the size of the pothole significantly larger, and then the depth gets bigger as we get to a lower volume road. So a 1,500 centimeters square pothole, that's 12 centimeters deep. So it just gives you that kind of indicator of what we're looking at for those. Next slide. So our measure for potholes, again, we want to achieve the requirements on the minimum maintenance standards 100% of the time. We strive to achieve that on a regular basis. We're working to implement a digital transformation project on road patrol. So historically, all of our road patrol has been on paper, so our staff are traveling GPS records where they're at, but as far as documenting the surface type and discontinuity on the surface, we're marking those on paper. Those are paper transferred to the supervisor, which is then relayed out to staff for repair. We've implemented a piece of software, or in the process of implementing a piece of software called RJ Burnside. It is a specific patrol software. It's all digital. So they will be able to mark exactly where an issue exists, and all that information will be electronically transferred through to our staff for repair. It's a fantastic advancement within that group, and we're looking forward to seeing that in 2025. Next slide. Streetlight maintenance. So what we have, that's generally burnt out lights. It is a requirement under minimum maintenance standards to respond to burnout lights within a certain time frame. Again, these are lights illuminating our roads and intersections, not necessarily some of the historical lights that are lighting up private lanes and other things, but we receive those through our case system, again signed out to our Public Works technical supervisor. So we replace lamps, repair that infrastructure, replace lights, and do all those types of things. So you can see the case in 2023, there was a bit of a backlog on certain things because of some staffing issues, which is why we've had a pretty significant jump there. We're still seeing 366 cases in October, so we're expecting to see into that 400 to 450 range on cases. Keep in mind, we have one operator and one bucket truck that's responding to all these things, as well as regular maintenance. So it's a heavily used portfolio that we're going to be keeping an eye on and monitoring for requirement for additional resources in the not too distant future. So the measure for that, again, is to achieve MMS requirements 100% of the time. That is a 7-day response on a Class 2 road and a 14-day response on a Class 3 to 5 road. Next slide. Dust control. So, and we've combined that with street sweeping on this particular issue. They're very separate and distinct processes, but they have a similar process from our group in implementation. So for dust control, we apply calcium chloride to our roads in the spring. It's graded in, compacted in, and helps build that stabilized road base. Street sweeping is where we go all of our hard surface roads, most of our hard surface roads, and we provide street sweeping services. There's a council policy that identifies where and when we do that. We've expanded that program recently with additional resources to try to get it done on a more constrained time frame. So we've also implemented a new process on both of those with our customer service peers, which is to treat it where we have by depot area. So we will go out and we'll start to put calcium chloride on a section of road or start sweeping an area. If we're getting calls and complaints about those services within those areas, we ask customer service not to enter a case while we're working in that area, to simply advise the resident we're working there, and if it's not done within a certain time frame, to call back and enter a case. And you know, that has worked very, very well with the customer service group. So it's restricted a lot of cases that would otherwise have just been put in and then closed right after we finished the work. And so regular communication with the customer service staff is important to keep that process working smoothly. Next slide. This is sort of the numbers that you see, and you see between 23 and 24, that's when we implemented that customer service process, where you can see a drastic drop in the number of concerns related to dust control and sweeping. So yeah, we're going to continue with that process over the next few years, and hopefully we see the numbers continue to drop. Next slide. Ditching and drainage. So this is probably our most difficult one. A lot of the drainage issues are not easily rectified or require resources beyond just general operations and patching and so on from a time perspective. So we review all those issues as they come in. One of the things that's a common misconception is that ditches are they're not there to drain private property. They're there to maintain our road structure. They're there to ensure that the road base has somewhere to drain, so there's water not sitting in the road base. There are a number of private issues that get raised to the municipality on a regular basis, and we work with the residents to advise them that those are not municipal issues to work with. There are solutions that are greater than the operational base to deal with that, either through the Drainage Act or other means. But those are a challenge for sure. So we do also elevate some of those broader drainage issues to our engineering group, so they can do some local studies and figure out where they go, and then those get implemented through other means as well. But the local drainage issues, backups, culverts, blockage, stuff like that, those are all these types of cases. And so our measure for this one is to investigate within 15 days, 80% of the time, when seasonal conditions permit. Especially, it's difficult to evaluate drainage matters when we're in the middle of the winter or in the peak of the summer when everything's blown dry. So those are the numbers as well on the side, and I believe that's my last slide. I'll pass it back over to Brenda.
Thank you. So throughout this initiative, we identified a number of internal challenges. So as you've heard, we don't have everybody on one system. We have multiple systems. We have JDE Case, CityWorks, Excel spreadsheets, and little ticks on pieces of paper. So with the systems we have, we also discovered that data isn't always easy to retrieve. The reports are not always giving us the information that we require. We also identified the need for different workflows. So you heard with urban trees about stumping and planting. That workflow, it doesn't flow through our case system well. We also have an inefficient flow of information and a lot of manual processes, which is causing a lot of inconsistencies. So in case, we've identified some things that the issue type can be manually typed in. So when we were collecting data, we noticed there was pothole, 2 words, pothole, 1 word, potholes. So we're trying to work with customer services to make sure that it's a drop down so that those are consistent going forward so we get better reporting. There is no date field currently for investigation time. So for things like ditching and drainage and urban trees, they do an investigation, and we want to look at cycle time for that investigation as opposed to resolving the entire case. We can't get that information easily out of the system currently. It's sometimes put in the notes, but we can't pull a report on that easily. The case status isn't always updated. So when it comes through customer services, it's an open case, it's assigned to the department. Often it is kept open until it's closed, as opposed to going in and putting in progress or on hold or a budget consideration, which gives more information to customer services when the resident calls in, as well as filling in notes. So we're working with departments to make sure that they are filling in the notes section and providing an update. So when the resident does call in to customer services, there's information to be shared. Next slide, please. So we did establish measures and targets as part of this initiative. Unfortunately, we don't have the means to track a lot of them efficiently. So we're looking at digital transformation projects in some areas. Brian talked about the patrol software. There's a number of things that we are looking at. And we're looking at how we can better track our inquiries so that we can pull reports on them efficiently without having more manual processes. So next steps, we're looking at the feasibility of a customer relationship management system corporately, citywide, for all departments. So either one system for everyone or systems that can integrate with the systems we currently have so that things talk back and forth. We're also looking to create a customer service toolkit for things like email signatures, voicemail messages, and inquiry responses to have more consistency in that. I mentioned digital transformation. There are a number of initiatives happening in all areas to alleviate the manual processes and try to automate more and make better use of the technology we have. Strategy and innovation will continue to work with departments to provide support in the development and the tracking of their measures, and we will be establishing regular reporting to council on all the service measures. And now I'd like to throw it back to the Deputy Mayor to wrap up.
Thank you. As you can see, it was quite an event to go through all these different departments, and I want to thank each department because, you know, at first when here you come with this new process, everybody's thinking, oh, here's another one. You know, yeah, it'll go away in another couple of months or whatever. But I got to really appreciate all the hard work that each department did to work with me and with everybody else to make this, you know, successful. It wasn't easy in some cases, but everybody worked hard on that. So a couple of things I want to talk about. Our strategic plan talks about measuring performance. And if we don't measure, how do we know if we're doing a good job? And that's what we've talked about around this table for quite some time. With this exercise that we just completed, it'll make our customer service more transparent and hold everybody accountable. And it will lead to continuous improvement, with no doubt. I didn't want this to be just another report and in 3 months be forgotten. And I wanted this to carry on until we get it right. And that's the key message I want to everybody in this room, is that we're going to continue, and we're going to make sure we continue until we get it right. We're having each department report back to council on a regular basis, however that regular basis is, and how they are doing, and if they have challenges. And we know they will have challenges out there. But somewhere along the line, maybe us councillors might be able to help also. We might be able to help solve some of your problems. We can't solve them if we don't know what your problems are. So I think that's very important. We need to, with all the information that we have gathered here today, it was really enlightened me in every department of the challenges they have. And I really believe that there's things that we can help. We need to build trust in our service. We need to provide in a timely manner for the people. We need to set expectations, accountability, and transparency. By doing this, everyone wins. So on that, I would just like to thank all the departments that were involved for taking the time and the effort in this exercise. So I know it took a lot of time and out of your busy schedule, and I believe we all have learned something in this process. I also like to thank Brenda Stonehouse and Kathy Earn for all their hard work in putting this together. And I know going forward, you will play an important role for this to be successful. And I have all the confidence in the world that you will make that happen. So again, thank you everybody for participating, and I'm really looking forward to some good results in the future. Thank you very much.
So can I get a motion to receive the presentation? Councillor Richardson, Councillor Joyce, or Councillor Yeo, sorry. Councillor Warren, you have a question?
Yeah, I do. I have one for Brandon at the very start. Composters and digesters. So is a digester those little machines that digest your compost? Or I know most things about garbage, so I was quite interested in that.
Thank you for the question through you, Mayor Elmsley. Digester is a contained unit, so no airflow going through it. Composter would have airflow that helps break down the matter. So both roughly the same size of unit, but just one is open, allows airflow, one is closed, does not, just depending on the types of materials that you're putting into it.
So it's meant for outside, it's not the small ones that go into your kitchen?
That's correct.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Joyce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, what really stood out for me there was the non-planning inquiries landing in planning. I guess one solution is we can move all of customer service to planning, and then they can look after everything, but I know that's not reasonable. So in this, of this almost 1,000 inquiries, do you have a sense of like what they were about and why they landed at planning? And I can only assume you've got plans in place to move that aside to help the planning department.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, thanks for the question. We're flattered. We are so happy that that's exactly it. Answers to everything. Jacks of all trades in planning. And Brenda and I just shared a little glance, I think, with one another, listening to your question, in terms of not having the maybe more formal or digitized, more modern way possibly of collecting the data, but we have been tracking it. When we started looking at, and just talking, right, with the staff and listening to the types of inquiries that we get, and, not even very appreciative of the staff, not even really being frustrated about it, or I think the frustrations come from when they're unable to answer the question, which they're not obligated to do, not really when it's not related to their area of business. But that just, I think, speaks to the interest and the desire on the part of staff, and I don't think this is limited to the planning division by any means, but that's our observation, is that we are, trying to answer all the questions if we can. Okay, so tracking it by just getting categories on, if we can gather where the inquiries are coming from. So are they being transferred internally? We are using the phone queue software now. IT and customer service work together to help planning set that up. A number of divisions are using this automated system now, which is great. It gives you way more data than I think we even know what to do with at this point, but it's really helpful, and it's going to become even more helpful as we look at modernizing and just becoming more efficient in how we manage the calls that are coming in. So we are tracking. They really do range across the board, including inquiries for other municipalities. So yeah, I mean, if you can think of a question, whether it's related to municipal government or not, it can land with us. And again, probably not limited to the experience in the planning division.
Councillor Ashmore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Brandon. First of all, I wanted to thank Deputy Mayor McDonald and all the staff members who did their reports here, respective reports. And prior to that, Councillor Richardson, who started the customer service journey like a few years ago, and trying to improve upon this for our constituents. So my question is through you to Brandon there. The case system is the key to everything here, and as Deputy Mayor McDonald said, we want to help as councillors. Like, we're in the customer service business, so we want to help our residents, and we would like to have a more active role in trying to get things resolved for the people we represent. You mentioned about the dashboard, and I know that it's an important thing, but will there come a time where we can plug in your case number and you can get an update any time of the week, any time of the day for that resident, or even for yourself? But you can't put in a case number that somebody else registered. But if you had that ability to register, or to get an update, take the onus off our EA, take the pressure off her, and we could do that for the public, or the public, if they had that number, they could access that. Just wondering if that's down the road fairly soon that we could do that. The other thing is, when you get a case resolution, it just says case number, so I got to look back. I print everything off. Everything's in the computer, but I print everything off, put it in a folder like this of the case numbers, and I have to go back and cross-reference what that case number referred to. But anyways, I'm just wondering if there was a way to make it more user-friendly. I know we pay a lot of money for this JDE. We pay about $326,000 a year for this maintenance licensing fee, plus 8% a year. So it's a program that's based in the U.S. that we use. I know your predecessor, we talked about maybe one day weaning ourselves off this case JDE software, but that's a topic for another day. But my question is, how could we maybe have an accessibility to those numbers and those case files without putting more staff time to get results, or to get answers for people?
Through you, Mayor Elmsley, to the councillor's question. Thank you for the question. I think in the current state of the application, providing that level of detail to council is not available with the application we currently have, unfortunately. Not saying that we potentially couldn't look into methods of trying to make information more readily available to you folks when you're requesting that information. I know customer service team would be happy to support where possible on that. Constance and I actually had a conversation about this not long ago with some work that I think she's doing with you folks as well for resource availability to you. But at this time, unfortunately, my understanding is there's not let's call it a read-only version of the application that we could make available for council to be able to look. But I do think that, as Brenda alluded to, as we're looking forward to other options that may be available to the city for a case management system, maybe that's something that we would want to include as something that we would want to see in the new version of the system. You also mentioned about case resolution. So there is a short list of updates or customizations that we've requested through JDE case that we're working with the folks in IT. And one of those is around having resolution text inserted into the closure email that residents would receive when when a case is closed. So we don't have residents calling back in to say, oh, I got a case closure notification. I'm not sure what this case was about because I only have a case number. It would provide some context to those folks about which case it actually was.
Thank you.
Councillor Richards.
Thank you, and through you. And yes, congratulations to you, Deputy McDonald and Deputy Mayor McDonald and the team. It's awesome because you're seeing it continue to evolve. It's all about customer service, it's all about communication. But having this round table today and getting updates from the different departments, like we learned about, well, we know the planner on duty tool for planning, and it is a very useful tool to have as a resident and as a councillor as well. The tree cleanup, like 270 cases cleaned up within, this year. The digital transformation in public works, like there's so many good news stories coming out of this update. And personally, I love the direction that we will be getting these updates throughout the year, because we're learning on how we're evolving as a city and providing better customer service and communication to our residents. So well done.
Councillor Warren.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and yeah, it was really, I also really liked the roundtable approach. It was great. I have a question for the Deputy Mayor. When you were speaking, you were saying how council can help our senior management team. So what do you envision that looking like?
Thanks for the question. Through you. Through our conversations, we had lots of conversations about that, and people talked about their challenges. One was manpower. So I can't maybe meet this target because of manpower or of the equipment they need or so on. So it was very important to say, okay, well, as council, if we want to have better customer service and they have issues that they can't meet their targets, then bring it to council and say, I need one more person to fulfill the obligation for better service, or I need a computer, or like roads, they're doing the tablets. So that was a good initiative to start with. So they're going to have tablets, so they can have on-site right there, and so on. So those are the challenges that each department faces, but we don't hear those challenges because they sometimes doesn't come out. But I heard them all, and I heard them loud and clear. And I suggest to all the departments that if they have these challenges, then come and talk to us and make a point to bring it either around budget time or whatever. And then council can decide at that time, is customer service, is that important, or is the budget more important? And those are the decisions that we make, those decisions around this table.
Thank you.
Anything more? No? Yes. Thank you to the task force. Enlightening what you brought forward today. Obviously, a lot of work, a lot of discussion, a lot of detail dug up. Really appreciate your work on this issue, and let's keep going. And we're in the customer service business. It's called public service, but yeah, it's a good news story, as you say, with what is going on. And the quality mantra is continuous improvement, and I think that's probably in the Black Belt program as well. So let's embrace it, and let's work together and make sure that we make this the best we can. So thank you. We have a motion to receive the presentation. All in favor? And that's passed. Moving on to consent matters. Need a motion that all the proposed recommendations shown in section 12.1 of the agenda be approved by the Committee of the Whole in the order that they appear on the agenda, sequentially numbered and forwarded to Council for consideration at the next regular Council meeting, save and except 12.17, 12.18, and 12.110. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Warren. Councillor Yeo. All in favor? And that's passed. 12.17 is your extraction. Councillor Warren, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I extracted this because I truly believe this should actually have some input from our Waste Management Advisory Committee. And because this is a big change, people don't realize when you read the report, you talk about it talks about non-eligible sources. So non-eligible sources are all sorts of small businesses, not-for-profits, daycare centers, and other entities, including our own municipal services. So this is a huge change. And within the report, staff recommended a letter go to the minister. And I think that hopefully there will be a concerted effort through the municipal sector to push back on this, because we gave those people that service for over 20 years. And now we're going to be taking that away. And I think we're not the only municipality that has problems with this. So I just felt that it should also go to our Waste Management Advisory Committee. So I do have a motion. I recommend that report WM 2024-08, Blue Box Transition Options for Non-Eligible Sources be received, and that this report be deferred until the December council meeting to allow consultation with the Waste Management Committee.
You seconding that, Councillor Joyce? Okay.
And I can't speak to it just the time.
You want to speak to it?
You can't.
Well, no, we
It's a
can't.
deferral.
It's a deferral. So,
Just timing.
all in favor? And that's passed.
Oops. So,
Item 12.18 is also yours, Councillor Warren?
just in the same vein, I won't speak to it, but that report, Waste Management 2024-009, Waste Management Bylaw 2016-144, repeal and replace, be received, and that this report be deferred until the December council meeting to allow the Waste Management Committee to consult on the bylaw. That's the motion.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Joyce?
Again, it's just, I can't speak to it.
There's no debate. All in favor? And that passes. 12.110, calcium chloride program is yours, Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Originally, I did bring this to council as a memo, just looking at our calcium program to see if it was hitting the sweet spot when it comes to dust control, and obviously how that calcium product helps bind the roads together, and it saves us operational and maintenance costs over the year. The reason I did extract it is in 2018, council had made a recommendation to increase applications to the 6,000 liters per kilometer. On table 1, we've never, I don't know what we did in 2018 or 2019. Do we try those 6,000s and recognize that it was too much? Because we are constantly going down each year. And I'm wondering what the evidence is to say that, you know, it is going down. Is this the optimal rate? To me, it just looks like it's completely well below target. And the targets are changing each year, so I'm just looking to have a better definition of some clarity on the report based on where we were supposed to be on application rates and where we are today.
So you would like the Director Robinson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to council. So the table one that's in the report on page 4 clarifies or shows what we've been doing in application rates from 2020 to 2024. Councilors noted there that the target rates fluctuate a little bit and have been slowly declining with this year being, you know, kind of a rebound up a little bit. The rates in 23 were set, or the targets were set based on some challenges within budget. We're back to, you know, reasonable levels. So I'll back up a little bit. So the report that was guided to council that provided direction to staff to up from 2,000 liters per kilometer to 6,000 was much needed. Our roads were in a state of disrepair at one point. We did achieve higher application rates through 2018, 2019. What we realized through that is that 6,000, based on our road structure, widths and so on, was too high. Roads couldn't absorb that amount of material. As we've started to go through the recent years, we've been monitoring that application rate. We have a high level of comfort that we do have reinstated within the road structure an adequate amount of calcium chloride to stabilize those bases. And you can see that within the you know, the gradual decline in case calls and complaints related to road conditions. And so we're at a point right now where we're trying to monitor and adjust what that best rate is moving forward. And you'll see that the achieved rates of 4750, 4750, 44, 45, and now you know, we're at the 4,000 mark this year. So we're confident that the application rates are achieving the goals, but we'll continue to monitor that. If we get to a point where we start to see the road bases are starting to degrade to the point where we're not comfortable with them, and we think that a heightened application rate will start to re-solidify bases, we'll by all means start to make adjustments within that target rate. But the volumes of material putting into those roads, what we were finding is that the road could absorb it all, and we were just losing it to the ditches. It was running off, it was a waste of money, and it's an environmental issue. So we're trying to find that sweet spot where we maintain the condition of the roads where we want them to be, and also you know, being budget conscious and environmentally mindful.
No, and I appreciate that. Like I said, when you're looking at numbers and reading the appendixes with the reports and the prescribed amount, you know, and you're not seeing that in your table, it does flesh out those questions for verification. And one more question is, have we looked at other peer municipalities to see what type of rate they're using on their rural roads? And I push the rural roads again because I'm very rural, and I do have a lot of gravel roads, and this is one of my hot topic items usually every year. So I'm just kind of curious if we've done some peer review on this.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, when the original report was approved, there was a peer-to-peer review on that. I think part of the challenge within CKL's road structures, we don't have a wide, robust road network. We have a lot of substandard narrow roads. So an application rate of 6,000 per kilometer, likely we would be there if we had full width roads. So narrowing the road structure down drives to that lower application rate. So the answer is no, we haven't done that, but certainly we can start to have conversations with our neighboring municipalities to see what they're doing.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And I think it's a good exercise, and I appreciate the report in front of us, and I definitely hope that the Roads Task Force uses this information too when they're looking at the road, you know, the different conditions of the roads that we are faced in the Kawartha Lakes. So I'll move it as to receive.
I got a couple other people who have questions. Okay, I'll come back to you. Councillor Joyce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, my question, Director Robinson, is on table 2. We had a 32% spike in the price of calcium chloride in 2023. Now, I know a lot of, through supply chain issues with the pandemic, we saw huge spike increases across the board in many, many areas in 2021 and 2022. So I just surprised to see that spike in 2023. You also mentioned other alternatives are being considered. What do you, like, why did it spike so much in 2023, if you can answer that question, and is that making other alternative products more attractive going forward?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, so the spike that we saw in 23 was because that was the renewal year for our contract. So we had a multi-year contract in place, and you'll see 2020 to 2021, there was a negligible increase. 21 to 22, that's when you start to see really that was a fuel adjustment through that existing contract rate. And then when we retendered to get new rates in 23, we saw the impacts of COVID and everything hitting in that year. So that is the challenge in it, and that's why you see in table 1 the significant cost change from year to year on that, right? And that's what driving the actual unit rates are a confidential matter for the suppliers, but the percentages are fair game. So that's why we tried to illustrate some of those jumps in rates. Now, there are other products out there. We've had conversations with some of the suppliers, but nothing that's really a viable alternative for the vastness of our road network. If we had a much, much smaller gravel road network, it may be worthwhile taking a look at some alternative technologies or applications. But when you start to multiply the 900 or 800 and something kilometer roads times an increase, it's just not feasible. So we're going to continue to look at it. We'll evaluate it, but at this time, we're still recommending staying forward with calcium chloride.
Thank you.
Councillor Warren.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and that was really my question, the alternatives, but I looked it up this morning about the environmental problems with calcium chloride and getting the sweet spot, like you said, because if it's just going into the ditches and going into water courses, do you change the amount when you're closer to water bodies?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. We apply a consistent application rate on all the roads, regardless of location. But again, what we're trying to do is we're trying to find that sweet spot so we don't have any exterior runoff and everything is controlled and captured within the road base.
Thank you. Councillor Richardson, back to you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I will move to receive the report.
And forward to the next
council
meeting. Sir, seconder, Councillor Warren. Did you have a question, Councillor Yeo, or were you just supporting? Okay. All in favor? And that passes. On to item 13, which is new or other business. We have a memo from Deputy Mayor McDonald on rental housing protection called renovictions, looking for a new bylaw. Councillor McDonald, or Deputy Mayor, would you care to speak to it?
Yes, I do. Through you, thank you very much. My recommendation is that the staff investigate a possible licensing program or implementing a new bylaw to prohibit and regulate the demolition or the conversion of residential rental properties and report back to council with information recommended by the end of Q1. And if I get a second, I'd just like to talk about it.
Councillor Richardson.
Yeah, as we all know, the increase in renovictions is a term used to describe the improper evictions of tenants to undergo repairs or renovations to rental units. Is now being felt by residents of City Kawartha Lakes. While some landlords may be generally renovating units with exhaustive repairs that require tenants to vacate the premises, but there are those who are using this mechanism as an excuse to evict tenants and immediately raise rental prices. The City of Hamilton and now the City of Toronto have both recently implemented new bylaws to deter landlords from using this mechanism unlawfully. These bylaws are supported by a licensing program whereby landlords must obtain a special rental eviction license within 7 days of issuing eviction notices. This license would require landlords to obtain the appropriate building permits for renovations and report by a qualified professional agreeing that the renovation would require a vacate unit to order to be completed. The City of Toronto program would also require landlords to provide a plan for housing displacement for tenants. For an example, offering temporary unit at a similar rent or a rent gap payment, and offering a moving allowance or compensation to tenants opt to move elsewhere. There are landlords who follow these rules and treat these tenants fairly, but there are others who are compounding this current housing crisis by illegally evicting tenants, knowing an appeal cannot be seen by the tribunal for several months or longer, driving up the cost and displacing people. That's my rationale for bringing this forward.
Councillor Richardson, do you wish to speak to it?
Yeah, sure. I'll add a couple of notes just on that. I think it's a great memo moving forward. And I also want to recognize that, you know, we need to have this put in place because I think it creates some stability, and we don't want to put that additional burden on our own human services for the City of Kawartha Lakes and our City of Kawartha Lakes agencies that are out there, because those do have negative impacts if they are being evicted, and it does put pressures on our resources as a city and our agencies. So I think this is a good direction moving forward.
Thank you. Councillor Warren?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, I totally agree. I brought this forward to Director Faber, that this is an issue for sure. And the whole Landlord-Tenant Act and how it affects social housing is also a big issue. So last week, myself and I think Councillor Joyce was on that call to the Attorney General in the background, right? So we brought up a few different issues about how we could improve the Landlord-Tenant Act board, and so we're going to be working on that. So this could also be part of that also. Yeah, so I'm fully in support. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a mover and seconder. All in favor? And that passes. And that's the end of our agenda for today, unless you want to stay. Thank you all for your patience, and thank you for the early start, and we're basically staying on schedule, I guess. I have a motion to adjourn. Councillor Ashmore, Councillor Yo. All in favor? Thank you, folks.